There's a kind of person who can describe their future in vivid, breathtaking detail and has been describing it almost unchanged for 10 years. They can tell you about the business, the book, the body, the life in another country. They can tell you with real feeling, real specificity. They've thought about it so many times the picture is high definition. And then the conversation ends and they go home and nothing moves. Not that week, not that month. The dream stays exactly where it's always been. Enormous, beautiful, and completely untouched. The easy thing to call this person is lazy, or afraid, or undisciplined. But if you've ever been this person, you know none of those words fit because you've watched yourself work incredibly hard at other things. You're not lazy. So the real question, the one that actually matters, is stranger than laziness. Why does someone do nothing about the one thing they say they want most? The answer starts with something nobody tells you about dreaming. It feels good. Not in a small way. In a way your brain treats almost exactly like progress. When you vividly imagine achieving something, really picture it, the success, the recognition, the version of you who made it, your brain does not perfectly distinguish between the fantasy and the real event. It releases a quiet hit of the same reward chemistry you'd get from an actual step forward. You feel the warmth of the achievement without having achieved anything. And here is the trap inside that. The fantasy delivers the reward of the goal while removing the risk of the goal. No failure, no rejection, no finding out you're not good enough. Just the clean, safe pleasure of the finished dream, available anytime you close your eyes. So the dreamer isn't failing to act. They are, without realizing it, getting paid for not acting. Every time the real world feels hard, they can return to the fantasy and collect a small, free dose of the feeling they're supposedly chasing. Why would you climb the mountain when you can feel the summit from your couch? But there's a second layer, and it's the one that really locks the cage. For a lot of big dreamers, the dream is not just a plan. It has quietly become part of their identity. They are the person who's going to write the novel. That idea is precious to them. It makes them interesting. It gives them a future. It tells them they're not ordinary. And as long as the dream stays in the future, that identity is safe, untouchable, perfect. The moment they actually start, all of that is at risk, because a real first chapter can be bad. A real business can fail in month 3. The instant a dream becomes an action, it stops being a flawless idea and becomes a fragile, breakable, judgeable thing. So some people protect the dream by never starting it, because an unattempted dream can never fail. It stays a masterpiece forever, precisely because it never has to survive contact with reality. They're not avoiding the work. They're protecting the dream from the work. And this is where it gets genuinely painful, because that protection comes with a cost the dreamer feels every single day. There's a specific kind of ache that lives in people like this. It's the gap. The distance between the enormous person they are in their imagination and the ordinary Tuesday they're actually living. And the bigger the dream, the wider that gap and the louder it aches. Most people assume a big dream is motivating. For the chronic dreamer, the opposite is often true. The dream is so large, so polished, so far away that it doesn't pull them forward. It just stands there, looming, making everything they actually do feel small by comparison. Why bother writing a clumsy first page when the masterpiece in your head is so perfect? The dream becomes less of a destination and more of a judge. And no one wants to spend time with something that only makes them feel behind. So they do what people do with a source of quiet shame. They avoid it. They stop thinking about the actual steps because the steps remind them of the gap. And the dream slowly transforms from a source of excitement into a low background hum of guilt. Something they carry, not something they chase. Now, here's the part that actually changes things. The reason just take action never works on these people is that the advice misunderstands the problem. The dreamer doesn't have an action problem. They have a scale problem. They are emotionally attached to the dream at its most enormous, most finished size. And a dream that big has no doorway. There's nowhere to step in. You cannot take a first step into something that only exists as a finished cathedral. The shift isn't motivation. It's permission. Permission to make the dream, temporarily, small. Small enough to be unimpressive. Small enough that it no longer protects the identity and no longer threatens it either. The first version isn't the novel. It's one big paragraph. It isn't the business. It's one conversations with one potential customer. The work is not to think bigger. The chronic dreamer is already the world champion of thinking bigger. The work is to think so small it feels almost embarrassing, because a goal that's small slips under the radar of the fear, and the fear is the only thing that was ever actually in the way. And something quiet happens when they finally do this. The dream stops being a flawless object they have to protect and becomes a real, messy, breakable thing they're actually touching. It gets smaller, it gets uglier. It also, for the first time, gets real. And a real, imperfect, half-built thing in your hands turns out to be worth infinitely more than a perfect one that only exists in your head. Because here is the truth underneath all of it. The big dream was never the valuable part. Dreams are cheap. Everyone has them. They cost nothing, and they protect us from the one thing that actually builds a life. The valuable part was always the small, unglamorous, slightly disappointing first step, the one that trades the perfect imaginary version for an imperfect real one. The people who dream big and do nothing are not lazy, and they were never short on vision. They have more vision than anyone. What they were never told is that the vision was the easy part, and that the dream was never meant to be admired from a distance. It was meant to be ruined slowly and joyfully by being built.